Journey to the Beginning of Time is a Czech movie from 1955 where a group of dapper Eastern European kids go on a journey to, you guessed it, the beginning of time. These go-getting preteens, dressed in their adventure gear, learned about history and fossils and decided to go on an adventure themselves. Not quite explained, they go through all the stages of our history, visiting ancient man, mammoths, saber-tooths, dinosaurs and a lot of other stuff I don't feel like googling or opening a history book for. Any normal parent would blow a gasket if kids went outside these days, but back in those days more things were possible, especially in Eastern Europe, as these brave kids face adventure and danger like it's nothing. There's not really a plot or much character development in this film, and it feels more like one of those movies you would see at school when the teacher didn't feel like giving class for a day. All in all, though, it's a quite enjoyable, albeit old, movie with some pretty nifty stop-motion animation and effects for its day and age, and especially the origin in the then still communist-controlled Czechoslovakia. Journey to the Beginning of Time is a relic of its time and might be a bit much for today's viewers. For people who love old movies with a twist, however, this comes very recommended. Check that. 1 million years BC, ape men walk the earth and fight among themselves for dominance, trying to stay alive in an extremely hostile world with blue-screened giant lizards and something that looks a little bit more than an actual dinosaur. One of the prehistoric men gets cast out of his tribe after a power struggle between leaders and finds himself a blonde-haired tribe that is slightly more advanced. Using weapons instead of sticks and being slightly more friendly, they invite him to be part of their group. He quickly noticed the blonde bombshell of the group, played by heartthrob Raquel Welch, who fits quite nicely in her loincloth outfit. The difference in nature, however, throws some mud into the whole situation, and drama and action ensues. 1 million years BC is a classic movie and maybe one of the best-known B-movies in history. From its iconic poster to Welch's loincloth outfit and the usage of actual lizards instead of dinosaur effects, it almost feels like a fantasy movie rather than a historic one. To me, it was a lot more enjoyable as the latter, of course, since it adds an extra layer to the movie. The plot is pretty straightforward, but for a movie without any real conversation, the actors only use grunts and moans to communicate. It keeps you hooked from the beginning to the end. Not the best prehistoric man movie out there, but definitely one of the best B-movie ones. Check that. Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors is a Ukrainian movie from 1965 about a guy, Ivan Mikolayiuk, who has a strong bond with his female neighbor, Marichka, whose father just so happens to kill his father. Despite this, the love between Ivan and Marichka is too great to ignore, and they wish to get married, until tragedy strikes. What follows is a slightly different but delightful movie that is far from any Western movie you would have seen. The movie, which of course in Ukrainian, shows us a lot of the culture and scenery of the country and its people. There's a lot of folklore and singing, turning certain scenes seamlessly from joyous to haunting. The combination of the visuals, the colors, camera work, the folklore and music is really special. So special that I'm quite sure that I missed a lot of symbolism. There are many shots that are so specific, whether in positioning or colors, that I'm sure there's a story behind the story. One that I didn't quite get cause I'm not a Ukrainian. It all looks and sounds great, however, the plot also continues in such a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect it, including the shocking ending that will leave you a little baffled after. Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, rightfully so, is considered to be the most heralded Ukrainian film in history and a classic of magical realism cinema, thanks to the Ukrainian hottie that recommended it to me. Check that. The Siege of Jadotville tells the true story of a group of Irish soldiers and United Nations peacekeeping troops who are sent to an area in the then Belgian Congo to protect a town, Jadotville, and avoid a conflict. The Irish soldiers are specifically requested because their country never owned another country and is thus the most neutral force possible. It's led by a fairly new commander played by Jamie Dornan, who quickly has to deal with a verbal standoff with some French mercenaries. Suffice to say that this verbal standoff won't be the last one, as many forces, mainly led by arrogant leaders, try to get their money's worth from the conflict raging in Congo. The siege of Jadotville is one of history's well-known military last stands. A last stand, for those who don't know, is when a small force has to go against a very large and more powerful force, and does so heroically and driven, compelling stuff. And so is the siege of Jadotville, not only for the heroic soldiers who fought off hundreds of enemies, but also for the injustice they were dealt after they got back to Ireland, how they were disgraced just so a couple of top hats could keep their noses clean for the outside world. The movie is tight. The action is good. The camaraderie between the soldiers and the face-offs between their enemies are quite well done. Jadotville is a well-made movie that's definitely worth a watch and shows a hidden and forgotten battle that should be remembered by all. Respect for these soldiers. Shame on the big shots whose incompetence and greed ruins generations. Smash that. I don't generally watch Bollywood movies since I'm not a fan of musicals, and all the Bollywood movies I've seen have dancing and singing, and a lot of it. I totally ignored it with this movie. Kesari, about a Sikh, you know, the turban-wearing badass warrior caste from India, who has a type of falling out with his British superior and is transferred to Saragarhi fort that rests between Gulistan and Lockhart fort and enables communication between them. Arriving at the fort, he quickly seizes control of the rowdy bunch of soldiers inside, using his charm and gaining the respect of all. And then, the word comes from the British fort that Afghan forces are marching towards them. 10,000 soldiers versus the 21 soldiers of the 36th Sikhs of the British Indian Army. I don't think I need to explain what happens, and for those in the know, which I wasn't, this movie is based on the true Battle of Saragarhi, which has gone into the ages as the greatest last stand in human history. Kesari is a wonderful movie with humor, a little romance, a lot of heart and quite some action at the end, and yes, it has singing and some dancing, but not overly annoying. The first song shows the love between the main character and his wife. The second is an awesome scene bonding the soldiers and immediately makes you love them all. I don't quite remember if there's another one, but knowing it didn't annoy me is already a victory in my book. The credit song after seeing the heroic battle is awesome and a great ending to this, and I'm censoring myself now, beep 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 ending. I didn't expect to like the movie as much as I did, but Kesari is a wonderful movie that has a little bit of everything. Of course it's an exaggeration of what truly happened, at least the details, but you kind of know that when you see our main character perform some of the wildest fighting movies that would make a lot of kung fu masters jealous. Stop whatever you're doing right now and go watch Kesari, it's awesome. Smash that. I Shot Andy Warhol is a '96 movie about Valerius Solanas, a man-hating feminist who pretty much wrote the book on how modern feminists see men. And the fact that she, like the title says, ended up shooting Andy Warhol because she felt wronged. We follow Valeria as she tries to live her life in New York as a sex worker, flashing back and forth to her childhood, college and other moments in her life. She discovers that she's a lesbian and thinks she has a knack for writing. She ends up writing Scum, aka Society for Cutting Up Men, and wishes to come into the good graces of Andy Warhol. Needless to say, things don't go as expected. I Shot Andy Warhol is an interesting movie about a quaint and curious person who has had a rough childhood and didn't come out quite normal. Her Scum manifesto was regarded as a radical feminism and argues that men ruin everything and that women should get rid of them. Sounds familiar, right? Watching the movie, it is ironic that the way Valeria Solanas acts in the movie, and historical footage, is very similar to modern feminists and reading SJWs. For this reason alone, it's an interesting movie, although I would have wished for a little bit more Andy Warhol. Seeing this is a type of autobiographic movie, however, it's of course normal that the focus lies on the crazy lesbian, but hey, however weird Valeria was, she's just not a very enjoyable person, and it gets hard to watch a movie about someone you don't like. Overall, I Shot Andy Warhol is an okay movie, but once you've seen it, that's kinda it. Check that. The Heartbreak Kid is a 1972 comedy about a guy who gets into marriage a little bit too soon, goes on a honeymoon, meets an incredibly beautiful and flirty woman played by Sybil Shepherd, and then decides that he made a huge mistake. It's kinda as if The Graduate got a sequel but with different people and locations. It's a typical dark tragedy comedy that isn't haha funny but more funny in schadenfreude. Both couples and the parents have hilarious but cringeworthy moments that often lies a little bit too close to reality than we want to say out loud. As expected from a tragicomedy, the ending is quite tragic too, which makes it all the more delightful. I really liked The Heartbreak Kid, which apparently got a Ben Stiller remake in 2007, which I'm never gonna see, and I would advise it to all the cynics and divorcees who know that they should have thought twice, or thrice, maybe even 4 times, before continuing. Smash that. The Shadow in My Eye is a Danish historic movie about the bombardment of a school during World War II by Allied airplanes. We follow a couple of characters, from a nun/teacher who is strangely passive-aggressive, rebellious and angry, to a group of kids, one of them being a boy who saw a gruesome killing of 3 women and their driver by, once again, an Allied airplane, and finally a member of the so-called Hypo Corps, which were the Danes who collaborated with the German during World War II and acted in a uniformed auxiliary police. This last one is played by Alex Hogg Anderson, who you will probably remember as Ivar the Boneless from the series Vikings. These characters interact before the actual event, so you feel even more when it actually does. This movie is based on real events. On March 21, 1945, the British Royal Air Force's real mission was to bombard the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen, but accidentally bombarded a school. More than 120 people, including 86 children, were killed during this. The movie is effective in conveying its message from beginning to end. What struck most for me was how the flow of the movie was so similar to the approach of the bomber planes to their target and the destruction they caused in doing so. Stuff like this happens in every way, and it's good that it at least comes to light in a movie. Let's help humanity learn from it, though we all know that those who start and wage wars are usually those who lack humanity while the rest suffers. Watch this. Smash that. From Beyond is yet another Lovecraftian horror story featuring Jeffrey Combs and some very nifty and gooey effects. In this movie he plays the assistant to a mad doctor who invented a machine that stimulated the pineal gland. The pineal gland is that part of the brain that regulates certain hormones and its effect on sleep patterns. Conspiracies say, however, that the pineal gland allows to see truth and the actual reality, other dimensions and stuff like that. And that's exactly what happens when they turn on the machine and see interdimensional creatures swim in the air. It gets a little bit more complicated when they realize that these creatures can attack, and it gets even more complicated when the head scientist gets killed. Combs' character gets thrown into the insane asylum, but things do not stop there. A hot blonde and a tough black dude join Combs' character to get to the bottom of his mad ravings. Will they still think he's crazy when they see the truth, or will the truth turn them towards madness too? From Beyond is glorious 80s gore horror with practical effects and special effects coming to a gooey conclusion. There's some sexy time that's totally just there to be sexy, and it's quite frankly glorious, the movie that is. Also, the sexy stuff adds to that in my opinion. Why? Because it's fun. Unapologetic fun. Well made. Classic horror. Great stuff. Smash that. The Seed is a 2021 science fiction horror movie where 3 pretty ladies rent a house and have some good old girls only kind of vacation. During their Instagram selfies, glasses of wine and female banter, they witness a meteor fall to Earth, mainly their pool. They fish it out and find themselves with an egg, which hatches. I suggest you watch the movie to know what happens next, but I'm sure you can already imagine something. Chances are that you will know exactly what happens. Luckily, there's a couple of moments in this film that are surprising. To me, it quickly became a cosmic horror, close to Lovecraftian in a way, as a certain visual style used in Cage's Color Out of Space and some others were used in this film as well. This, and something else. makes this more cosmic horror than science fiction horror to me, but you might disagree. Ultimately, the movie is fine. It doesn't really surprise, and near the end it feels like a pilot to a series, which is something a lot of Netflix movies do, which might leave you a bit unfulfilled. Overall, this is a Netflix and chill kind of movie that's fine when you see it, but leaves you wanting more later, something which won't happen of course, which is sad cause I would like to see a little bit more of Chelsea Edge. Check that.